In Southern Africa, the U.S. says it will only return to talks to resolve Zimbabwe's $17 billion debt if key reforms are made. This comes as its new ambassador, Pamela Tremont, takes up office in the country after a 3-year vacancy. Tremont says a key reform is the restoration of human rights. She is set to begin her tenure amid widespread outrage over a second bail denial for 77 opposition activists. Tremont's statement also comes as human rights groups have condemned a decision by the Zimbabwean High Court to uphold a lower court's ruling denying bail to an opposition party leader and 78 activists who were arrested last month. They were charged with gathering with the intent to promote public violence. To discuss this, I'm joined by Executive Director for the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, Roselyn Hanzi. Hello, Roselyn. It's a pleasure to have you on air.
Hello, and thank you once again for the invitation.
All right. So, Roselyn, what is your assessment of the U.S. Ambassador's statement calling for human rights reforms in Zimbabwe?
I would want to start off by saying that the statement by the U.S. Ambassador is consistent with what the predecessors to that office have always said over the last at least 2 decades in terms of the position of the United States government. Their foreign policy message is quite clear, and there is consistency there. There's nothing new in terms of what the new ambassador is saying, but it's something that has always been put across by the United States is one of the conditions to restore normal relations with the government of Zimbabwe. So if we look also at the position that the government of the United States has made, even during platforms that have been created at the international level by the United Nations, such as the Human Rights Council-led Universal Periodic Review Mechanism, where the United States member states are given an opportunity to review, to be doing a peer review of each other's human rights records. Some of the issues that have always been raised are issues around protection of human rights defenders, guaranteeing freedom of expression, free and fair elections, putting an end to enforced disappearances or politically motivated violence, is some of the recommendations that the government of the United States always gives to Zimbabwe on how they can work towards improving the human rights situation.
Okay.
So I see message discipline there and consistency.
All right, Roselyn, you did say that, the call for reforms is actually nothing new, this particular human rights reform. Now, but do you think that this time around, that it's going to generate any tangible momentum for change?
Well, we definitely hope that going ahead, as the president of Zimbabwe has said since he took over following the change of government in 2017 and subsequently following the elections that we have had in 2018 and 2023, he has said that he will be a listening president and that the voice of the people is the voice of God. And definitely the calls for reforms are not just coming from outside. They are also coming from inside, including from us as human rights lawyers and human rights defenders who are on the ground. And we do hope that because of the position that the president has put across, that there will be reforms that are implemented to ensure that there's compliance with the Constitution of Zimbabwe, then definitely we hope that there's going to be political will to implement those reforms. And we see that with the fact that with the structured dialogue that is there now around the arrears clearance and debt resolution, there are some reforms that have been put on the table, and they've been invited stakeholders to input into some of the reform measures and also some of the indicators to see how Zimbabwe is moving ahead. And there is a particular reform matrix on governance and human rights, and we hope that they will take that seriously so that Zimbabwe can move forward in terms of clearing the debts and also being able to borrow internationally.
All right, now considering, in light of these human rights reforms, can you describe the current state of human rights in Zimbabwe, particularly in terms of freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and also association?
We do have concerns that we continue to note, particularly around the rights that you have identified. And we call these participation rights because they enable the citizen to be able to participate fully in terms of expressing themselves, sharing information, receiving information, or being able to speak out in different ways, including through protest. And also being able to associate whether with other groups or associations or political parties of choice, whether they actually support the government of the day or they oppose the policies of that government. So the concern that we see is that we continue to see the continued application of some of the problematic provisions of the criminal code. We still have many people who are being arrested for insulting the office of the president. And this is where they've made comments on some of their concerns around the way the country is being governed. And in terms of the constitutional rights on freedom of expression, you should be able to state your views without a fear of being arrested or being persecuted or prosecuted. But we continue to see that sometimes when there are comments that are made, which of course you expect, because as a public officer, there will always be criticism and comments, we continue to see those arrests. We have also seen that there are challenges around protests, even where people have not yet protested, but there's some sense that they may protest. There are threats that are issued that if you protest, we are going to actually deal with you.
Okay.
We will have the law applying, but the Constitution guarantees the right to protest. The Constitution guarantees the right to freedom of association, including of civil society organizations and human rights defenders. But the respect for those rights is still lacking.
Okay, well, sadly, we have to, wrap up this conversation now. But thank you so much, Roselyn, for speaking to us on this.
Thank you for the invitation.